The Agenda with Steve Paikin is made possible through generous philanthropic contributions from viewers like you. Thank you for supporting TVO's journalism.
Tonight on The Agenda.
It's really good to hear that our voices are being heard. And the Black history curriculum in particular is important because really all of our learnings and understanding comes from our history.
Then, later.
It starts with, childhood. You have this very myopic view of what loss is, and there's kind of a baffling sort of sentiment to, like, where did this person go?
Also tonight.
There's so many different ideas and versions of what Afrofuturism is, but I think at its core, it's really about how are you inspired by the past to inform your present, to plant seeds for the future.
Students across Ontario likely know it's Black History Month, and soon they'll have a better sense of some of the exceptional contributions of Black Canadians. A new provincial policy means those stories will become a mandatory part of the Canadian history curriculum. Deborah Buchanan-Walford is a high school educator and president of the Ontario Alliance of Black School Educators, and she joins us now from Brampton. Welcome, Deborah.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
All right, let's begin with the announcement itself. Education Minister Stephen Lecce, when announcing the new change to the curriculum, said Black history is Canadian history. Why has it taken so long to get to this point?
Well, it's an interesting question because for decades, advocates, community groups have been asking for a change in the curriculum that better reflects the diversity of Canada and, of course, specifically with the Black community. And it hasn't mattered which government has been in power. So I think it's a bit more than just political will. It's also perhaps ignorance on the significance of this. And I'm happy to see that perhaps that has shifted, with the current government. Secondly, I do believe also there's been a lack of Black educators in our school systems. There's been a lack of Black leaders in the school boards, and that has been changing for the past few years. So now that we've had a little bit more representation, then perhaps this is what has pushed us to this point. And of course, continuous grassroots advocacy as well.
I actually want to pick up on that when we talk about fellow Black educators and administrators. How did it feel? Not only for you, you said you were happy, but how did this announcement make you feel and your peers feel when you heard it?
Yeah, initially it was a positive reaction. It's really good to hear that our voices are being heard. And the Black history curriculum in particular is important because really all of our learnings and understanding comes from our histories, understanding who we are as a people and integrating into the Canadian society. So not treating Black history as a separate topic. But beyond that initial positive reaction came the questions of, okay, why is it only in the history curriculum? Why is it only in specific grades? And what more will we be doing beyond just looking at, this moment in time of history, but beyond other subject areas as well? So we started to think about, okay, what next? This is a very small step for something that we've been advocating for so long. So it's good, but we want more for sure.
All right, let's get into the nitty-gritty of the actual curriculum. Obviously, it's still in a work in progress, but can you clarify what grades will actually be impacted and actually have these course offerings?
Right, so currently it's only history for grades 7, 8, and 10 that will have the mandatory Black history curriculum.
And under the changes, can you give us an idea of perhaps what aspects of Black history will be taught in those grades?
So each grade sort of focuses on a different time period in history. So for example, in grade 7, we start to learn about pre-Confederation Canada and so on. And therefore, integrating Black history into those different eras will look at the timeline of Black Canadians across the country and of course the province. So for example, we're expecting to hear about the Black Porters who were the first unionized group because unions would not allow Black employees to become a part of their labor unions. And we're also hoping to hear about the impact of hockey, of how many Black men were the first people who were playing hockey professionally and really well in the country. And, now hockey is a beloved sport all across Canada. So those are just some of the things that, we expect to hear. And of course, also about segregation that did occur in Canada, the impact of, for example, Viola Desmond standing up against a segregated movie theater, and in Nova Scotia, and so on.
Now, September 2025 doesn't sound that... It sounds like it's going to take a little while. I know there's a lot of work there, but I'm just curious, what was your thoughts? This government has passed other curriculum sooner. This is a ways away, really. What are your thoughts on that date?
Actually, I'm happy that we're taking more time, because to implement this is going to require a lot of thought, a lot of consultation, a lot of development of resources that may or may not currently exist. And it's also going to need wide consultation beyond just with educators. We also need to hear from community. We need to hear from students as well. Student voice is really important. So giving it enough time is crucial. And also, the educators need time to learn the material and prepare to teach it, right? Because when we get a new curriculum, we don't necessarily get ready to go lesson plans. We get a document that's a guide, and we have to build from that. So that timeline is a good one, in my opinion.
All right, you mentioned students. I want to ask, as an educator, can you talk to me a little bit about why it's important for Black children to see themselves reflected within the educational framework?
It's something when you walk into the room as an educator and you see a student light up. And this is not to say that students of other racial backgrounds don't deserve to see representation. Representation matters for everyone. But statistically, there aren't enough Black educators in schools. There isn't enough curriculum data or information on Black representation, Black culture, and therefore students tend to feel lost in the system. When you are reading a textbook and you see someone that looks like you, when you hear names that you can recognize from your culture that you've heard from your parents and your other family members, you feel like you belong. And many of our students are struggling with that sense of belonging in schools, which leads to a host of other issues, mental health issues, behavioral issues. So we're really trying to incorporate all students into the classroom so that they can also feel as agents in their own learning.
All right. I understand that you didn't grow up here in Ontario and go through the Ontario curriculum. You grew up in Jamaica. Yeah. And I want to ask you, did you notice a significant difference in the way that history was taught there? And obviously you came here as an adult, but you are in the education system. Is there a vast difference in how history is taught there versus here? Black history in particular?
Yeah, well, first of all, there's no separate concept of Black history in Jamaica, right? It's just history. We're a predominantly Black country, but also we're also very proud as a nation, and we are a multi-racial, multi-ethnic nation as well. So the main difference was that separation of groups. For example, I'm sure we're all familiar with, many different Chinese Jamaicans. There's Michael Lee Chin, who is also here in Canada. And we sort of have that holistic approach in our learning. And we start from the beginning. So from kindergarten straight through to grade 12 and even in post-secondary, there is an intentionality behind ensuring that everyone is reflected. Whereas, unfortunately, and I have a child in the system as well. So from that perspective, there is generally sort of a one-sided view on history as it's taught in Canada. And again, I know that there are growing pains, but Canada has been a professed multicultural country for quite some time. So it would be good to see more intentionality in how we teach history, how we incorporate the diaspora, how we talk about folks like Jean Augustine and Lincoln Alexander as people who are Canadians, but also people who have other histories outside of the country, from other countries like Grenada and so on.
I want to talk a little bit about perhaps the opportunity that is here. In grades 1 and 6 in Ontario, there's no history course. Instead, it is social studies. And you mentioned it would be courses in grades 7, 8, and 10 that would see these courses. Is there an opportunity for those junior and primary grades, perhaps, to maybe look at that as sort of the next steps in maybe making that mandatory, Black history for junior and primary grades?
Absolutely. And in fact, what we do need is a dedicated Afrocentric curriculum that is taught across all the grades. This can be taught in every class. For example, in a math class, students can learn about the impact of the Egyptians and the impact of other people who have developed mathematics as we know it. In English class, you can learn about artists and poets who are Black. So there are multiple entry points. And again, it can all be created with the age of the students in mind. In kindergarten, children are learning about the world outside their home for the first time. They're learning about other people. It's an opportunity to see, well, this is why this person looks this way. This is where they're from. This is how they speak, you know, embedded throughout the entire curriculum. So by the time students get to grade 7, they're already fully aware that people are different from them, that that's okay, that we're diverse, and that we are respectful of all different cultures. And now we can start getting into critiquing how we got here, what happened in the past, and how we're moving towards a better future.
Can Ontario play a leading role in encouraging other provinces to follow suit and mandate Black history learning in their school curriculums?
Absolutely. And I'd be remiss if I didn't say that in Nova Scotia, you know, they're already leading the way in this work. It would be great for the Ontario government to also reach out to them on their best practices and sort of form a coalition that can be spread across the country. Because again, while we're in Ontario, we're not static, people move around. And it's important to show the other provinces that we mean business, that we really do want a better life for everyone in the country. We want Black students to feel themselves as a part of Canada. We want them to be successful. And we're not just doing this for want of a better word, window dressing or check boxing. We want this to be a lasting impact for generations to come.
All right, we have about 30 seconds left, and I do want to ask you, you mentioned a few names, Jean Augustine, Lincoln Alexander, Viola Desmond. When you're talking about hockey greats, I imagine you're talking about Herb Carnegie, for example. I want to know, what's your favorite, not widely known, piece of Black history that you can leave our audience with?
I guess I could say as a Jamaican, so Louise Bennett Coverley, she is a Jamaican spoken word. People will think of it as spoken word, but she's a poet and actress. And she actually came to Canada and was one of the first Jamaicans to perform in Jamaican Creole outside of the country. And she's been an advocate for many years. She passed away a few years ago, but she was a staunch advocate for exactly what we're talking about, seeing ourselves reflected in the classroom, in the curriculum, our authentic selves, from a place of joy and inclusion.
Deborah, thank you so much for joining us on the program, and thank you so much for the work that you do.
Thank you for having me.
What's the likelihood of winning a Governor General's Literary Award for Young People's Literature? That might just be the kind of thing that the main character of Sarah Everett's book, The Probability of Everything, would try to figure out. It's the story of a girl obsessed with odds and the chances of things occurring, including the end of the world. As it turns out, the book did win the prestigious award in 2003, and we're pleased it brings Sarah Everett to our studio. Welcome to our studio, and congratulations, of course.
Thank you so much.
All right, so we've teased a little bit about the book. Has something to do with probability. Walk us through, sort of in a nutshell, what the book is about.
Okay, so the book is about 11-year-old Kemi. She is, as you said, obsessed with probability. Her family is very close-knit Nigerian-American family. And at the start of the book, we find out that there's an asteroid headed for Earth. I don't think that's a spoiler. Yeah, and it's about Kemi sort of collecting this time capsule to make sure that her family is remembered by the next Earthlings.
Why is Kemi so fascinated with the science of probability?
I think because the idea of certainty and uncertainty in the world. I think that when you're at her age and going through the things that she's going through and her family's going through, it's kind of, you're grappling with what are the chances that this happens versus that happens, and how are things going to progress.
Let's talk about Kemi. You mentioned she's Nigerian. The book itself is set in the U.S. You're from Canada. Was her character inspired by a particular person? Did it have anything to do with you?
I would say that she's a pretty good proxy for me. It started off that I thought I was writing about a totally different character, and as time went on, I sort of got feedback from early readers, and they were like, "Oh, this character is a lot like you," and I was like, "Yeah, you're right."
How so?
So she definitely loves STEM, science and math, which I did too as a kid. Very close to her family. Again, she's Nigerian, which I am too, and so yeah, I would say those similarities.
The book, you could say, was inspired by your own experience with grief. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that.
Sure. So when I was 5, I had an uncle who lived with my family. We were very close to him, and he was a big part of the family. And then he suddenly passed away when without warning, at least to me. And what was interesting about that experience was it was my first experience of losing someone that I cared about, and there was so much mystery around it. I don't know if it's a Nigerian culture thing, but no one really talked about what was happening. And I would later find out, in fact, a few years ago, recently, I found out that he had actually passed from sickle cell disease, which I don't know if you know, it has a shorter life expectancy to begin with. So there probably would have been signs, or there would have been other sort of health complications that I could have been aware of. But because there was sort of this hush-hush nature of it, I didn't find out until I was much older that he had been sick, and that he would pass away as he did. And there was just, because of that, a lot of trauma for me as a kid, because you don't really know what's happening, especially when people aren't really talking about it.
Lots of questions for sure. I want to talk a little bit about the process in writing this book, because from what I understand, and even just hearing you tell that story, how raw it still is, how long did it take to write this book?
So that's a complicated answer because the book was sort of born about a decade ago. That was when I first conceived of the idea after another experience of grief, actually. And I started writing it in 2020 with around the same time as the George Floyd riots and things like that. And it took me about 6 months to write, all in all. But I would say that definitely the process of writing it was a decade or more long. So,
you mentioned sort of that new kind of loss, that in terms of when we talk about the names of George Floyd and Breonna Taylor. Could you elaborate a little bit about that? What do you mean by, as you described, a new kind of loss? What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I would say that Probability as a book is inspired by each of the significant sort of losses in my life. There was the one when I was 5 with my uncle. There was one when I was a little bit older as a teenager. And there was one, well, I think that as a society, we all sort of grieved the loss of those precious lives, Breonna Taylor, George Floyd. And I think that the idea of different types of loss and different stages of loss, that really appealed to me. There's loss as a child, so childhood loss. There's loss as an older person, an adult. And there's also loss, a communal sense of loss. And I think that I wanted to touch on all three when I was writing this book, because I think they all have different facets, and the ways that we grieve those and approach those are significantly different. And I hoped to convey loss in all those different ways in the book.
I'm curious, did your feelings towards grief evolve through that period, even from the inception of the book, through your own personal grief, through what society was grieving as well? Did your relationship with grief change and evolve?
I think it really did. I think the perspective on grief is probably the biggest thing that changes. It starts with, childhood. You have this very myopic view of what loss is, and there's kind of a baffling sort of sentiment to, like, where did this person go, and what happened, that kind of thing that happens when you're a child. And then as you get a little bit older, there might be more emotion attached, the different phases of grief. And then grieving as a society, I think, for sure, as a Black person who was sort of watching the George Floyd debacle, it was heartbreaking and frustrating. And I think that those elements can definitely be a huge part of grief. Grief isn't just the sadness or the mourning or the loss. It's also sometimes anger, and it's disbelief, and it's confusion. And I hoped to bring all those things together in the book.
As we know, grief does not discriminate. Dealing with grief when you're younger can look quite different from grieving as an adult. What are some of the nuances you had to take into consideration when writing about grief for a younger audience? Because this book is geared towards a younger audience.
I think that a lot of times people think that the books that are written for young people have to sort of be dumbed down or watered down. And it was really important to me that not only was that not the case, but that it was written in a way that is honest and truthful to the experience of grief, but also something that would open up conversation between kids and their parents and the people around them. So definitely, I hoped that that through the book, kids would find sort of the language to discuss elements of grief, to express, oh, this sounds like what I was going through, or even the parts of the book that are a little less heavy, things like building a time capsule and family time and things like that. So I hope that there were those different layers that would appeal to children.
All right, I want to change gears a little bit. I want to talk about your very impressive resume. Correct me if I'm right here. Probability of Everything is your 5th book?
Yes.
I'm curious, are there certain themes that you like revisiting in your books?
I definitely do enjoy going back to the same well. I think that a lot of authors do. In fact, I read something recently, I'm not sure which author it was. They said they are pretty much rewriting the same book for their whole career.
Okay.
And I think that I sort of relate to that. There definitely are themes that I find that even if I don't put them intentionally in the book, they sort of come back. So things like grief, family is a huge factor in my books. What else? There are relationships between characters and different dynamics, emotions, strong emotions. Those sort of core factors that, they keep sort of recurring in my books.
One of your characters in the book says this phrase, make waves. And I want to talk about, when it comes to literature by and for young Black readers, how does the current Canadian landscape hold up?
So I think I've been guilty, like a lot of Canadians, readers and writers, of sort of believing that there's not much happening on the Canadian literary landscape. I've been learning that that's not the case. There are a lot of really great Canadian authors, Black Canadian authors particularly. There's like Lawrence Hill with Beatrice and Croc Harry.
Yep.
There's also Louisa Oname, Lizelle Sambury, Jael Richardson. There's a lot of really great authors that are out there making great work, and I think that it's a very exciting time for Canadian literature.
Let's talk about your inspirations. Who were they? Was there particular pieces or authors that kind of got you going in this direction?
Yeah, so I always say that the book that kind of made me as a writer, more so than a reader, but a writer, the thing that made me who I am as a writer is the book Charlotte's Web.
Oh, why is that?
Well, it was the first book I read that featured a huge loss in it.
Right.
It was the first book that made me cry, and it kind of blew my mind, the idea that a book could create such complex, deep emotion, and that was allowed, and it was okay to express grief as a result of a book, and to take risks, and to write for young readers. That also was something that was new to me at the time.
All right. I'm curious, segueing from that, have you received any feedback from young people about how your book might have helped them navigate through tough situations?
So my book is for kids ages 8 to 12 and up. Hopefully can be read by others as well. But because it's written for a slightly younger audience, I often hear from their parents or their guardians and teachers sometimes, and it's very much, they might be like, oh, this is from Jimmy, and then it goes to Jimmy, and Jimmy's like, oh, I'm reading your book, and I'm having so much fun. And there's also, I think more than just the grief element, which is of course really important. I've been seeing kids making like time capsules. I've seen them making asteroids. So there's the fun part of the book, and then there's the sort of deeper themes. And I've been lucky to hear back from readers on both of those, people who are excited and enjoying the book for all its components.
I do want to ask, and it's a curious one, seeing how a lot of Kemi's characteristics and traits, as you mentioned, might tie to you. You live here in Canada, but you set her and her family in the U.S. Was that a conscious decision? What was the reasoning behind that?
Yeah, it is a conscious decision. And I think in some ways it kind of speaks to a blind spot I had in terms of what we were talking about. Canadian literature, not sort of feeling like I had permission to write about Canadian stories, but also I think for better or for worse, the U.S. is sort of considered a general sort of ideal space for where many books are set. And I think that when you talk about a city in the U.S. or a small town in the U.S., we all sort of have the same idea in our mind. And because of that, that makes it a little easier for readers to sort of enter and with that, and not think too much about, oh, like what's happening there? What does that mean? Because the book does deal with quite a few complex themes. So I wanted to make that part easy for readers, where the environment, the setting is just pretty straightforward.
All right. I want to go back and I'm hoping you can help us understand these terms here. There's young adult fiction, and then we have middle grade fiction. You talked about sort of the age range, 8 to 12 age, in terms of who this is geared to, but of course, many can enjoy, like myself. What's the difference?
So young, I often say the book is just for young readers, and that sort of encapsulates two age groups. The first is middle grade, which tends to be for readers 8 to 12. And then there's teen fiction or young adult fiction, which is 12 to 18. And so those two categories together make up young readers' fiction.
You yourself, sort of in that area and genre in terms of writing. Do you see yourself continuing to write for younger audience, or is there maybe perhaps a day where you're writing adult fiction?
Yeah, I hope to write a little bit of everything eventually, but I definitely consider it a huge honor to write for younger people at the moment. I feel like it's such an interesting developmental stage for kids to be in, and it's also it's formative, and it's dynamic, it's interesting, it's there's a lot happening, and there's a lot of seed for themes that are sort of developing in their lives. And that gives me the opportunity to play with different themes that I might not be able to in adult fiction. But also, I do think that kids are the best readers. They're so they'll tell you when they like something. They can be harsh. They'll tell you when they don't like something. Yeah, and that makes my job as an author really fun.
Do you ever get worried that maybe sometimes the themes and topics in your books might be maybe a couple years down the line it might make sense, or is that something that you constantly have to challenge yourself and be like, no, this is, with grief, anyone can lose anyone, like you've mentioned, you can lose a pet at a young age as well, or something like that. Do you ever find you have to challenge yourself as well?
Yeah, I think that there's sort of this misconception that that kids need to be protected or sheltered from books that deal with deeper themes, things like grief, as you said, sickness. And I think that what's actually true is that they are experiencing those things. We can't protect them from the realities of life. And so what books and other forms of media often teach kids is they give us a way to bring up those topics with kids. Hopefully they are a way to talk about those things in a safe sort of, a safe, comfortable environment where they're able to ask their questions and work through their feelings and hopefully become familiar and able to express themselves as they get older.
All right, in our last 30 seconds, I do want to ask, what advice do you have for young folks, particularly young folks of color, who are out there thinking about publishing a book, but don't know where to start?
Probably the first thing I would say is that there's room for you. I think that as I was starting out as a younger writer, I definitely didn't always feel like there was room or that anybody wanted to read my work, and I've been lucky to discover that's not the case. So keep writing and do your research, and and just believe in yourself.
As Kemi's father would say, make waves.
Make waves, exactly.
What's next for you?
I have another book, middle grade, that's coming out in October. It's called The Shape of Lost Things, and available October.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Sarah. Congratulations again. It was a fantastic read, and thank you for joining us in studio.
Thank you so much for having me.
Dancer turned choreographer Esie Mensah didn't think Afrofuturism applied to her. Questioning shadeism, however, helped change that. Have a look.
We want to hire her, but her skin complexion, she's too dark. I happened to be all-black female cast of dancers, and I was the darkest one out of all of them. The other ones were probably medium complected. The artist said that I was too dark and didn't want to hire me. Being that one black girl, if you're standing with a group of people, you will stand out. I have to be so amazing that nobody could ever say that my complexion is going to be an issue. It's a choice. The same way that we can have different shapes of bodies on stage, we can have different genders of bodies. All of that is a choice. We can dismantle the thing. We are actively making choices to uphold it. So when we say, well, this is what the client wants, or this is what it wants, but did you introduce the client a different option? So then I navigated that for the next 2 to 3 years and was having immense difficulty. And if it wasn't for my siblings, I don't know if I would have gone through it because I wasn't really making any money. But I wanted to take pride again in who I was and what made me different from the rest. And so I leaned into my Ghanaian identity, into my African identity, and started just experimenting. Doing my TED Talk was my opportunity to actually heal a lot of what that experience was because I didn't realize that I hadn't. I went into the depths of myself to pull that talk out. It was the first time that I've ever done a public speaking of that magnitude. And I only applied because I didn't think I was gonna get it. And then I did.
Is there any way to see me without seeing my shade? Shadeism is about the default preferences that we are born into. And I question how we can break this generational cycle if we don't question those same defaults.
I started thinking about the fact that I did not want to wait for somebody to call me to say that I was good enough. And so the planting seeds of me becoming a choreographer and planting seeds for me to now start to take my identity as an African in the industry because it's so heavily saturated with Caribbean folks, which is not a bad thing, but I wanted to take pride again in who I was and what made me different from the rest.
When I met Esie Mensah, I knew her as the trailblazer of Afrofusion in our city and country. Everyone was talking about how she was fusing traditional African movement with contemporary dance movements.
Growing up in Hamilton, I often like to tell people that I was dancing from when I was in my mother's womb. Every Sunday, the Ewe Canadian Cultural Organization of Ontario, ECHO is the short form for it, we would come together as community well before I was born. I'm the last child of 5 kids. And it gave us a chance to continue to move in this rhythm as community in this beautiful way, to learn the dances, to hear the songs, to almost feel for them a sense of home, but also more so to offer their children that sense of home. And so I grew up in this rhythm from, my earliest memories were being in the background trying to dance with all of the elders. It was beautiful. It was beautiful to be able to find rhythm with everybody, to perform and drum with my elders, with folks that we're still connected to in this community. All of them used to dance before me, so it was very much so an intergenerational cycle of those that came and those that left. And as newcomers came into Canada, they would find out about the community, especially if you were Ewe, and would be a part of the community. I was so grateful that was my first real introduction into movement, was through my culture. If my grandmother was here, I feel like there would just be so much pride in her eyes. As one of the only ones that's committed to bringing a sense of culture, an honor to the culture, an honor to the ancestors and what came before me, in my own way through arts, I think there's so much pride. Again, it's taken me a lot of time to just receive it and to receive the gratitude, the fact that I'm listening. I think that's the part that excites them, is the fact that, yay, someone's listening. Somebody's helping on earth in the present. So that way we can help to just shift what's around us. I think the first time I heard about Afrofuturism was definitely because of Quentin. But I feel like it became really popular during Black Panther. If I were to explain Afrofuturism to my younger self, I would say that it's intentional storytelling. There's so many different ideas and versions of what Afrofuturism is, but I think at its core, it's really about how are you inspired by the past to inform your present, to plant seeds for the future. It was the first time that we got a chance to see and know and feel what we think Afrofuturism is. And I think that because there's so many different ideas, and when you Google search it, you can get everything from technology to a strong literature, academic stream, to visual arts. But I think that, again, when we think about it through like a Pan-African lens, I think that Afrofuturism is the ability to bring people together and create a new future. I think it's exciting. But what was interesting when I first heard about Afrofuturism, I didn't actually think that it applied to me. 5, 6, 5, 6, 7. It wasn't until being more connected, especially to the Afrofuturistic community in Toronto, that I all of a sudden started to find my own pathways and realize there's actually a lot of similarities. And I actually see myself as an Afrofuturistic artist. As a movement artist, I do find a way into Afrofuturism, and we are all using an ancestral resilience and ancestral knowledge that we are all, as artists, bringing forward.
Opening the doors for so many choreographers and doing such big projects and productions, and she really pushes what a dancer or movement director could be in terms of how she was telling her stories, especially as it relates to her Afrofuturistic productions.
I think for me, especially in the realm of ancestors, as that journey has been something that I have been on for, I would say now, about 10 years. I think that there's a deep sense of bringing forth my culture and heritage as somebody that was raised both Ghanaian and Togolese in West Africa. My elders, my grandparents, I've only had the chance of meeting one of my grandparents. Only one of them was alive by the time I went back to Ghana for the first time. Different people that I had not known, but are walking with me as I continue to move through this journey, especially as I'm the only artist in my family. And on top of that, I feel like they've added to the charge of what my purpose is. 5, 6, 7, and ki ga ga ki ga 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 ki ki ya ba 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 ki ki ga. Growing up in a Ghanaian household, being an artist wasn't necessarily the thing. I'm sure every immigrant household would say you have to be a doctor, you need to be a lawyer, you need to be an architect. You could be anything but an artist. And I push up against that because who else is better to showcase your heritage, taking an essence of the past, and through the movement by taking in both traditional and contemporary African movement and fusing it with the other styles of dances that I've also been trained in. I would sit with my VHS in my parents' house downstairs as I would replay Janet Jackson videos. That was always my favorite. Janet Jackson, Michael Jackson, Britney Spears. Just replay the movement. Brazilian samba, house, hip hop, the bits of jazz that I've done. There's a plethora of movement, and also influenced within Caribbean movement, dance hall specifically, and soca. So all of those things, I find the synergy. But more than anything, I find the through line between the movement. So go option 1, right into option 2. I know so many people like to say dance is universal. And I remember being at a talk a number of years ago and a gentleman said dance isn't universal. And that really opened up my eyes, and I was like, oh wait, yeah, you're right. I stand here in this building, Canada's National Ballet School. As I teach these students, I try to get them to understand the through line, That the same 3 steps that you might do in ballet, done with a different intention, all of a sudden we can drop into Afrofusion. Done with a different intention, we can drop into a house movement, or we can drop into a samba movement. The spiritual aspect was the charge that made me want to create what I'm creating now. When I started training, I started feeling the presence of my ancestors. I had been dancing commercially. I've had a career for about 5 years up until this point. How come I've never felt this when I've danced? I was feeling something deeply spiritual. I was able to take all of the bits of the work that have existed around me and found a place for it. My ancestors asked me to go into this, and they're prompting me to ask these deep questions, and it could cause pain, and I could see it and I could feel it. And so now for me, having gone through that, when I enter into a space, I want to know that I can ask you these questions. Not to dismantle you, but to let you know that in asking you these questions, they also will feed into the work that we're doing. Ki-ka, ki-ka, ooh. And here for your last one, yeah? Yeah. When I work with dancers, I want them to know that it is okay to invest more than just your body into your art, and that you can invest your spirit. So as an artist, as a spiritual artist, I come into spaces vulnerable to give people a chance to hopefully let go of their guards, to meet me where I am at. I encourage folks to meet me where they are at. I think for me, at this state in my career, I want people to see themselves in the work that I am doing. So whether it's working in theater or you hear me speaking, that you can feel yourself in the journey that I've gone through, and that hopefully inspires you in some way. And I feel like that is part of the legacy that I want to leave.
Canadian artist Esma Mahmoud raised questions about gender and race, along with a few eyebrows, when she mashed up athletic uniforms and evening wear in her sculpture series, One of the Boys. She is profiled in this season of TVO Arts. Have a look.
Art can challenge our expectations and open a world of possibility. This is One of the Boys, Black, by the artist Esma Mahmoud. She created the artwork in 2019. It's part of an acclaimed series of sculpture and photography centered around the artist's whimsical interpretation of a dress, as well as powerful questions about race and gender.
Okay, so what I'm seeing is a black Raptors jersey as sort of like a corseted top, and then the other half of the piece is like a ball gown with some kind of like silk or satin fabric draped over it, and it's very voluminous and long.
It's like streetwear on top, but bridal on the bottom.
It's very different from any kind of dress I've ever seen before.
Extravagant and entirely unexpected. The artwork is a hybrid of two very different kinds of uniforms. One part is a magnificent black ball gown with a dramatic hoop skirt and a long flowing train that drapes on the ground behind, while the other part resembles a sleeveless basketball jersey with the Toronto Raptors logo emblazoned on the bodice, along with the name and number of Raptor legend Vince Carter. Notice that the sides of the dress are laced like a corset, but using the laces of basketball shoes. The garment combines elements that might be considered masculine with elements that might be considered feminine, which brings up all sorts of questions about the ways we define and experience gender. This black version is actually one of 9 dresses in the series, with variations in other colors and featuring other teams. The dresses are often exhibited alongside a series of photographs showing models wearing each of the gowns while striking dramatic poses. These photos are usually shot in 3/4 length and almost always from behind, which the artist does to intercept the viewer's gaze. She doesn't want to let you see them all at once. In every photo, the model is black, but their gender is often ambiguous.
I think that's probably why this piece is so powerful. It's because everyone knows like what a jersey is and everyone knows what a ball gown is, and like kind of questioning what these two things mean together.
There's so much power in how we adorn ourselves, and the choice that this artist has taken, it's very fraught with tension.
Esma Mahmood was born in London, Ontario in 1992. She's the middle child and the only girl with 4 brothers who all played basketball through high school. Sports were at the center of her suburban childhood, and young Esma saw them as a way to connect with her brothers.
When you're a kid, you're playing sports with your siblings as a way to bond, and that's how I saw it. It was like a bonding time. So even though I was on the curb dribbling the ball and watching them play, it was still a bonding experience for me.
Growing up not far from Toronto in a family obsessed with basketball, the Mahmoods were huge Raptors fans. But it was the team's star shooting guard, Vince Carter, who really captured Esma's imagination.
Like, he just had swag and charisma, and I loved the way he played. And, you know, the man is a dunk master. So, you know, anytime the dunk competition came up, I was like, this guy is not human.
Off the court, art was another early passion. Esma would rush home from school every day to craft along to a popular children's TV art program. And by 16, she knew she wanted to be an artist. Today, Mahmood is at the forefront of contemporary Canadian art, with work across multiple disciplines, including sculpture, photography, textiles, video, performance, and installation. Her art uses pop culture, especially sports, as a lens to explore the dynamics of race, gender, and class. It's important to note that though sports have played a big part in much of Mahmood's work, the work isn't about sports. Rather, she uses the subject as a sort of backdoor to stage more difficult conversations.
As I realized, you know, sure, people are uncomfortable to talk about race, but no one's uncomfortable talking about sports. So I kind of used it as a trick to get people to talk about race. And you know what, to be honest, it worked.
She's almost using it as like a landing pad or like an airbag to kind of soften the blow. It's like an easy way to bring her message forward, right?
It's quite clever because people will examine what you've done for quite some time before they realize what you've done.
The concept for one of the boys comes from a significant childhood memory for the artist. One day, she was on her way to go play with her brothers when her mom stopped her and said, "If you want to play outside, you've got to put on a dress." So the young Esma went upstairs and put on a dress she knew her mom liked, fuchsia and frilly, almost like a tutu. But then, in a small act of rebellion, she popped her favorite basketball jersey over the top. It was a black Vince Carter jersey.
And when I came down, she said to me in Arabic, "You're not one of the boys. You got to take it off." And that "you're not one of the boys" really stuck with me, that phrase. And, you know, it was a hard pill to swallow. And, you know, I had many conversations with my mother after it.
This was a painful lesson for Mahmood about gender and the roles we feel expected to play. The artist and her mom have since talked about the moment, and her mother has apologized. She didn't recognize what it meant to a young person forming ideas about their identity and how they wish to express themselves. Nonetheless, the sense of rejection is a feeling that stayed with the artist for a long time.
I like that this was something that stayed with her. And then, you know, she thought to herself that I'm going to break this. Like, I'm going to break the status quo, this rule.
I know that art can come from a place of difficulty and challenge and hardship. So I can very much see how that story has come to life in these pieces.
It's a lot of stuff that has to be undone to get to a space to create this beauty.
For Mahmood, who's made artwork from materials as diverse as shea butter, chain, and rattan, concept always comes first. She selects the art medium that best serves her idea. One of the boys is an example of wearable art. Wearable art refers to artworks that take the form of clothing, jewelry, or other accessories. It emerged in the 1960s, developed by mixed media artists who were designing works around the body. To produce the first dresses, Mahmood collaborated with another young artist named Chandram Hoti, and the pair hired a seamstress to realize their designs. The artwork is made from silk, velvet, jersey, repurposed components of a Toronto Raptors jersey, shoelaces, and metal boning. Esma worked closely with the seamstress, perfecting the proportions of the hoop and bust. The dress required a large, dramatic effect, but it could not be so over the top as not to be wearable. Laced on the sides, the gowns are crafted to be adjustable to various body types. The first two dresses, one red and one purple, debuted at the Art Gallery of Ontario in 2017.
We should have that freedom to be able to express ourselves and do what we want, wear what we want. You know, that's the feeling I'm getting here.
One of the boys comes directly from the artist's childhood experience bumping against gender roles, where she once felt rejected for expressing herself this way. The artwork revives her childhood vision, now as a glorious and dignified statement.
One of the boys was kind of this amazing safe space to be who you are, and I really appreciated that and wish I had that as a child.
The sculpture raises a range of related discussions about gender and expectation, from male fragility to the underrepresentation of women in sports. Meanwhile, the photographs, which show the dresses being worn, steer the conversation toward the black bodies wearing them, especially the stereotypes black men face about showing vulnerability. Mixing the garments, Mahmoud mixes the codes that everyday items like clothing can represent. One of the boys presents a broader, more fluid, and freer notion of gender, one that fits the artist's own experience. It upends expectation and imagines new ways of being. And it tells us that we all have permission to go out and play.
Tomorrow on the agenda.
Because we had worked very hard to establish the Lieutenant Governor's office as a safe space for conversation, people trusted.
What kinds of things did they tell you?
Amazing, amazing stories.
That's tomorrow on the agenda.